Hey, North Dakota, Rob Port here.
And I'm Chad Oban. You're invited to a special live recording of Plain Talk on Wednesday, February 19th at the Peacock Alley in beautiful downtown Bismarck.
We'll be interviewing special guests, reacting to the latest headlines, and answering questions from the audience.
Admission is free, so plan to arrive early to grab a great spot. The reporting kicks off at 6 p.m., and after the show, Rob and I will stick around if for some reason you want to meet us.
That's Wednesday, February 19th at Peacock Alley in Bismarck, starting at 6 p.m.
We'll see you there.
This episode is presented by Dakota Resource Council. For nearly 50 years, DRC has worked across North Dakota to protect our land, water, and future.
Dakota Resource Council has definitely been shaping policy at the local, state, national levels. What role does DRC play in shaping that policy?
It's important for my people because we are grassroots people. We've always been grassroots people, Indigenous people, and having the tools and the resources that Dakota Resource Council can provide would up your game so much that, you can win and you can face these decision makers head on.
Become a member, volunteer, and take action, or donate today at drcinfo.org.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk, and we are going to be talking about a couple of very interesting stories today. One having to do with property taxes, obviously the big property tax bill. And by the way, that just got moved out of policy committee. It's on its way to the appropriations committee because, of course, it deals with a whole lot of money. So the appropriations folks got to take a look at that. That bill is sponsored by State Representative Mike Nathe, who's our guest today. It's the bill that's carrying Governor Armstrong's plan. It's the representation of Governor Armstrong's plan. It's House Bill 1176. But the other thing we also want to talk about that's getting a lot of attention is a bill that Representative Nathe has proposed, House Bill 1446, which changes how candidates are chosen by North Dakota's political parties, moving from basically making it so that every candidate who wants to appear on the June primary ballot has to submit signatures. Right now, if you have a convention endorsement from a state convention or a local district convention, you don't have to gather signatures. You can just go straight on the ballot. But let's start with property taxes, since that's the theme of this entire legislative session is property taxes. How you feeling about your bill, Representative?
Well, first thing, Chad and Rob, thanks for having me on this morning. I appreciate it. I feel great about the bill. It's I got to tell you, that's obviously a big landmark bill. And anytime you do a landmark bill, there's a lot of people that have a hand in it. It's totally a team effort. I just happen to be the prime sponsor leading it through. We've been working on this summer. There's about 7 or 8 different legislators that have had different issues, different points put in the bill. Governor Armstrong was elected. We then put his portion of it in the bill, his 1550 at the time. And it's been going through finance and tax. There's been a lot of amendments, a lot of discussions. Last night, they kicked it out with a due pass at 5 o'clock. They had a member that wouldn't be here on Monday, and he wanted to be part of the discussion. So they did that. They made a number of amendments. They changed it. If you remember, Governor Armstrong, his property tax portion was 1550. That has been knocked down to 1450.
That's the credit.
That's the credit. Yep, that's the credit.
Right.
The 3% cap is in there. A lot of the same stuff I proposed at the beginning of the session is still in there. They took away some intent language that said, hey, we want to go to path to zero. There was some discussion about, hey, we don't need to tie the hands of a legislature down the road. And future legislatures will decide whether they want to go to zero or not. And that was just intent language. So they passed a couple different things, Chad and Rob. One, to give the cities and counties an out. If they want to get out of the cap, the 3% cap, they could take it to the vote of the people. And if the vote of the people approved it, they would be exempt from the cap for up to 10 years. Again, they have to take a vote of the people, and I believe that's a 60% vote, but don't quote me on that. But there's little things like that that's put in there. The big thing that I think surprised a lot of people last night was the income tax. There's $15 million of income tax relief in the bill. And I think that's going to garner a lot of attention and a lot of discussion, to be quite frank with you. So so it's out of the policy committee now. It goes to House Full Appropriations, which I sit on, and there'll be a lot of discussions on the bill. And then once we do that, hits the floor, and then over to the Senate. And then we'll see what the Senate wants to do and see if the Senate likes the amendments, if they want to change it. You guys know these things are never the final product when they come out of the first policy committee. So I think this bill will be different than when we sign it at the end of the session. So, but I'm just glad they got it out so people can see it, talk about it, and let's move this on. There's a lot of support for the bill, a lot of other bills behind it. But I got to tell you, I think 1176 is the vehicle that everybody's looking at going forward.
So, Mike, how about schools? I mean, one of the things that I heard last night in terms of the caps is that cities and counties could opt out for the 10 years. Schools don't have that option. And are they under that same 3% cap? And why aren't they given the ability to opt out?
Chad, I don't know. Like I said, I just heard it last night at 5. I got in this morning and I had a bill hearing right away. So I really don't, I wish I could answer that to you. I did hear that this morning too, that the schools were out. I have an affinity for K-12, having been a past policy chair. And that's one of the questions I will have too when I see Chairman Hedlund, who I sit by. I'll see him this afternoon and try to get some more information on that. I realize the 3% for the schools, the 3% for all the subs are going to be a challenge. There's no two ways about that. And, without the cap, this property tax bill doesn't work. You have to have the caps. And so it's going to be a challenge. I wish I had an answer for you, Chad, but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough.
So do you think that, so you said there's a lot of property taxes bills coming in behind. I mean, we've got the Louser bill, there's a Weiss bill, there's a Mathern bill, all these different things. Do you suspect that those will just get defeated and then all those ideas will come into this one bill, or are they going to stay alive? Or what does this process look like over the next 60 legislative days?
I'm a little biased. I think 1176 is as is. There's nothing new in the House side that's going to be put in. If anything new is put in, it's going to be on the Senate. Because they worked that bill pretty hard. I think a lot of the bills behind this, depending on the committee and on the votes, I think wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them get a do not pass, with the exception of one. I'm hearing the Weiss bill has some support in that committee. And I'm not real familiar with that one either, but I hear that has some support in there. Again, that could pass the House and go to the Senate. But I know from talking to my Senate colleagues over there, they like 1176, right? So they want one tax bill. And I know they have some tax bill ideas over there that they've, quite frankly, put on the sidelines to wait to see what 1176 is. And I know people right now are going through those amendments this morning to understand what happened.
One of the things that the committee did, I actually like the getting voters, or giving locals and I guess voters a chance to opt out of the caps for 10 years at a time. I like that it's not a permanent opt out. And I like it gives a little bit more flexibility. I don't think that's a bad thing. Although I am worried because we've talked a lot about like in agricultural situations where you have a small number of landowners who are really footing a lot of the property tax bill, and they're a minority though of the electorate. I'm kind of worried about that situation where you have the large number of people who pay a small share of the property tax voting to eliminate the cap that's going to be paid for, for property tax is going to be paid for by small. That's another matter. I was really curious about them putting income tax reform in this. There's so many moving parts to property tax reform already. What did you make of that? And by the way, what they changed was basically the amendment eliminates income taxes for single filers, I think up to like 54,000.
Yeah.
And
it's the lower end. Yeah.
I think joint filers up to 90,000. I don't necessarily oppose that reform. I'm wondering in a bill that already has so many moving parts and you've already got to build, a coalition with a lot of different people. It seems like they're making this more complicated than it needs to be, Mike.
Well, I'll be honest with you, myself and a lot of others, we were surprised when we found out about this. We were surprised it was put into the bill, but let's face it, Chairman Hedlund has been a champion of income tax reduction. And Chairman Hedlund runs that committee, and he advocated for this and was able to get his committee on board. I think it did surprise a lot of people last night about the $50 million. I guess if it would have been my desire, would maybe have that in a separate bill and keep it clean, because we're talking property and property only. But committee and committeemen do what they want to do. So I'm not against the $50 million by any means, but it will definitely garner a lot of attention. And we'll see how it goes through. We'll see. I'm really interested to see what happens over the Senate side with this, and especially with the income tax part.
Mike, the one pushback that I've heard on this bill is the ag land piece. I'm sure you're hearing from farm and ranch groups that they don't. I mean, obviously, we all benefit from the caps, right? I mean, the increase will be less, but they're not going to see that immediate relief that maybe some of us with the primary residency will. How are you guys going to handle that ag land piece? And I mean, I assume some rural legislators are hearing it.
Well, let's face it, this bill is for primary residence, right? It's for Joe Sixpack's house. The ag land is for a business. It's for a farming operation. So if they want to do something like that, so in my mind, that's a business issue. It's a business bill. And I've met with the ag leaders, all three of them at one time. I said, I may not even be against this, but put it in a separate bill. What about my business? My business isn't getting any relief. What about my friends' businesses, right? So I'm not against giving business a property tax relief of some sort. But it shouldn't be in this bill. It should be a separate bill, separate hearing, and leave this one alone. This is just for residents, and that's where the ag guys, I think, are making a big mistake. This is a separate discussion. They need to, and I told them this: have it separately. You may even pass this, but you're trying to tag this on a resident tax cut. This is just for the residents. So if you do it for ag, you better do it for every business in the state, because ag isn't separate. You're going to do it for tech. You do it for everybody. So that's a whole nother can of worms, but that's a whole nother issue and discussion. So
I think both. I mean, to me, I put it in the same category. I'm not against doing something for our friends in agriculture.
Same here.
I think that's got to be a separate.
Yeah.
It does worry me that the primary pain point with property taxes is residences. That impacts the largest number of voters. And it's at a pain point. And so I think that's where the focus has got to be. If we want to do some additional things, then let's talk about them separately. But, you know, the one bill can't do all things. Also, we should point out the ag folks already have their primary residences exempted.
Well, a lot of them do. I've heard more. I get kind of sick of it when they say, well, you guys are doing nothing for ag. Well, we are. And so this bill, if you're paying property tax on your farmstead place, you'll get a relief. If you're not, you're already enjoying the farmstead tax exemption. So we're already doing something for you on your residence. Again, they're talking about their farming operation when you're talking about ag land. So that should stay. And this whole first part of the session, I've been trying to tell people, keep this bill focused on the residents. Just keep it there, keep it focused, because this is what happens up here. You get a good bill. You got a governor signing on. This bill's got major league momentum with the legislature, the public, the media. This bill is it. And that is why you see other ideas wanting to get tagged on, because they know this has probably the best chance of getting through, right? They don't want to do it separately, but I think it's in their best interest. Have a separate bill and run that stuff. I mean, I own a business. My business pays close to $50,000 a year in property tax. You don't think I'd like to have a little relief? You bet. I knocked on a lot of doors from January till November. All residences. I did not run across one person that said, hey, my business needs property tax relief. It was all citizens' homes.
What did you make of Governor? I'm sorry, just on that point, Governor Burgum, shortly after he left office, gave an interview where he said that legislators focus too much on the property tax because people are getting their property tax statements right at campaign time. So when you guys are all out knocking on doors, as you said, it's fresh in everybody's mind. His point was it's not as big. Property taxes aren't as big an issue as we've made it out to be. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't, because I heard at the door all the time. And, his philosophy is very good in theory, but in practicality, it's not. Because when I'm knocking on doors, somebody maybe who's retired, and they're like, Mike, my house is paid for. I got $5,000 in taxes. Now that's a nice home, granted, but he's got $5,000. What's it going to be in 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now? What I found interesting from talking to the residents, they weren't looking for elimination. A lot of them did not support Measure 4. They want these taxes to slow down, stop the big incremental jumps. They're willing to pay for fire and police and those things, but just in the schools, but just slow it down. I don't think I ran across anybody, or at least who answered the door, say eliminate my property tax. They know that's not realistic. But for Governor Burgum to say that, I support Governor Burgum. I like him as a friend, but he never had to go knock on the doors that we had to knock on and hear the people. So,
And not to mention, it doesn't hold true because he was saying people had just gotten their statement in the fall. You were knocking on doors in the spring,
in the
6
winter,
months. Yeah, in the winter. So, I mean, it doesn't really hold true. So,
I had to get my
you men-
signatures in the January, Chad. That's why I was talking to him.
Yeah, there you go. So let's transition. Speaking of gathering signatures and knocking on doors, you have a bill, House Bill 1446, that had a hearing today. You want to talk about what that would do, and then I want to talk about some of the pushback that I heard, I think, in opposition to this thing. But
Yeah.
I will give you credit. You seem to have brought together a lot of factions of the Republican Party today in opposition to your bill. So kudos.
Strange bedfellows, right? Strange
Yeah.
bedfellows.
So what would your bill do, and why do you want to do it?
So House Bill 1446, what it does is change the how you get on the primary ballot. Currently, right now, a statewide candidate gets on the ballot going through the state convention process. Once they win that nomination, they're automatically on the primary ballot. If a legislator is running in the district nominating process puts them automatically on that primary ballot. All this bill does is change that. They can still have their conventions. They can still do their nominating process. But what this bill says is, Mike, Nathe, you're running for representative. You have to get 1% of the voters in your district, which is 16,700, which would be 167 signatures. Once I get my 167 signatures, I am then automatically on the primary ballot. If I'm running for statewide office, the bill says 2,000 signatures. Once Chad Oban runs for governor, he gets 2,000 signatures, and you are now on the primary ballot. Again, both parties can still have their conventions, do all your regular work. It doesn't change any of the stuff they do. You can still nominate people. Just that nomination does not get you on the ballot. And that has been the big rub. My selling point on this is let the public decide who's on there. We have districts out there, 13 people in a district in Fargo decided who should be their candidates, Republican candidates, 13 people. Do they speak for all 16,000 people in that district? We had Rob had a story about a councilwoman up in Minot. She tried to go and they wouldn't let her go because she apparently wasn't Republican enough. So they get to be the arbiter about who's Republican and who's not. I mean, it's just a perfect example. A lot of the co-sponsors on the bill, on purpose, I put them on there, were everybody like myself who did not get endorsed, who got censored, who were attacked, and we all went out and got our signatures, and we won by huge margins. So did those districts properly represent those 16,000 people in their district? No. So let the public decide who should be on that primary ballot. I don't see what is so god-awful wrong about that. I know from the party side, I think a lot of them still have this old romantic view of the party and the conventions and everything else. You know, the party and the district processes used to work wonderfully because they would accept everybody in. Now, at least on the district level, they've been set up where they're pushing people away, and they're only picking certain, in our side of the aisle, Chad, certain Republicans. And I got asked a question today. Well, we vet them. Yeah, they only allow a certain level of Republican, just different degrees of Republicanism. There's different degrees of Democrats, right? And there may be a pro-choice Republican who wants to run. Under some of these districts and their rules, they would never even allow them into the room. I mean, how democratic is that? So let these people get their signatures, go on the ballot, and then they get vetted through the primary process and the campaign. So it's a 14-page bill, but it's a very simple fix. And I feel pretty confident about it. I jokingly say it, but I mean it. The only people that want this bill passed more than me are the people running next cycle. Because at least on my side of the aisle, they know how ugly these things. And Rob has written many articles, is pushing people away. We tried to find candidates last session on our side of the aisle. We couldn't find them because of all that stuff. And we tried to tell them, go get your signatures. No, I got to get the endorsement. No, you don't. Now, granted, it's easier for guys like me who've been running forever to do that, but a new candidate's a little tougher. But if everybody's on the same level playing field with signatures, then it's going to be easier to get a good candidate.
I wanted to ask you about that because I mean, obviously, I think you and I are on the same side of this issue. I mean, the problem at the conventions is they've become controlled by a very small faction of the North Dakota electorate, but they're having an outsized impact on the candidates that get chosen. But I mean, mostly they're failing at the June primary ballot. But what I'm worried about is the next generation of Republicans, like what I call traditional Republicans or normie Republicans, the sort of Republicans that we've become used to over the several decades that Republicans have been in power in North Dakota. They're not having a problem because a lot of them are like you. You have strong ties to your community. You're a known quantity. You've obviously built up a lot of support with rank and file voters. They know you. And so they like voting for you. I worry about the next generation of normies who come along who aren't going to have those advantages. And I think your bill's whatever. I wrote critically about it this week because there's another bill from Representative Ben Koppelman. That's House Bill 1424, which would do the opposite. Basically, it would mean that you're not allowed to appear on the June primary ballot unless you have the convention endorsement. So two sides of the coin. I'm worried because I think it's important that people, again, whether it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, I do think the conventions still serve a purpose. And I'm worried about the next generation of normies if they don't feel that attachment, if they don't, I worry how they're going to succeed at the ballot. I don't know that your bill addresses the problem that we both perceive.
Well, right now, the normies don't feel that attachment right now. The normies are being shunned. They're being pushed away. They don't want to come in. This bill does not, again, I don't mind at conventions and everything else. They can still do this under this bill. But look what happened last convention, the Republican Party and the people they nominated, right? Most of those people didn't win the primary. I mean, is that a true representation of the Republicans in the state? The bill says 2,000 signatures. That's more signatures and votes than it would be at a normal state convention. So I think what you're saying right now, Rob, has been happening for years. That's why we can't find good candidate or like normie candidates to run. And we can't find these people to do it. So it's happening already. I truly believe we can pass this bill. It will open the doors to find better candidates and more candidates to do this. I like the fact of getting signatures. I talked today about knocking on doors in January. I kind of grumbled to my wife about it, going, I got to go out there in the snow and cold and get it, because I was, quite frankly, spoiled at just going to the convention and getting the nomination. But I got to tell you, it was very uplifting for myself and Representative Bosch, hearing the thoughts and concerns and all the comments from the people in our district. It was a great experience for me as a candidate, for me as a legislator, and it just makes you a better legislator because you're more engaged, and we're inviting them for conversation. So I think this will help us. I really truly do. So this is not meant to hurt the party. They can still have their conventions and all that stuff.
So I tend to agree with you. And I think you and I have talked about this. I mean, in your district, you go to your convention, you get your convention, you may have Democrat opponents, but it's not competitive races. That this really did force you to maybe go and talk to your constituents in a different way than a non-competitive race would in the past. One of the oppositions, there's the district chair from District 11 in Fargo who said 167 signatures is impossible to gather, which seems sort of crazy. Representative Carl's asked him how long he'd been a chair, and he's been a chair since January. But what would you say to that? It seems to me if you can't gather 167 signatures, you're not going to be a particularly good candidate, let alone a very good elected official.
I should say the signature requirements in Representative Nathe's bill are not onerous at all.
No, and yeah. So to answer your question, Chad, the 167, that's already currently in state code. Myself and Representative Bosch got that in 2 Saturdays knocking on the door. Okay, 2 Saturdays. If anything, probably should be a little bit higher, but it's 1% of what's in your district. So if somebody says it's onerous, that just tells you they're probably not a good candidate. And that's my point. A lot of these guys are running knowing full well if they go to door, they may have a hard time getting signatures. And that should tell you something. That's why they want the district nomination to automatically put them on there. And then some of these candidates are in heavily Republican districts. They get it, and then they go against the Democrat, and the Republican voter doesn't know this guy is way off base. And he goes, well, I ain't voting for that Democrat, but I'm going to vote for, they don't realize who they're voting for. So this is another reason for the petitions bill. Now people know when they go knocking on doors. I find interesting this group of people is very adverse to go talk to the public. They would rather go to their little group of 50, 75 people and get the nomination that way.
I do think the problem we're trying to solve is people basically coming in, taking over these very small conventions. Some of these district conventions, like he said, 10, 11, 12, 15 people. It's just not very many people. And they take that over, and then they get to use the Republican brand.
Yep.
It's built by a lot of people like Ed Schaefer and John Hoven and Kevin Kramer, who've had a lot of success on the statewide ballot. And they get to use that brand, even though in a lot of ways they don't really subscribe to it. But I guess that's the only thing that gives me pause is I worry that if we just strictly go to everything's on the primary, there's not going to be, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. Obviously we're talking about this mostly in a Republican, but the parties serve a purpose. They serve a real, legitimate, important purpose. And that's the only thing that gives me pause. I don't think your bill is going to do anything bad. I just don't know that it's going to fix the problem.
But Rob, 44 other states do this very thing. 44 other states, and their parties are just fine. Their conventions are fine. There's a reason why the 44 other states do this very thing. It brings the public in. They get more public input. North Dakota is one of 6 states that do it the way we do it. And again, I think the strongest part of my argument is this does not blow everything up. Look at the 44 other states that are running this right now. So it works. We're not reinventing the wheel with this bill at all. I came up with the 2,000 signatures for statewide because I looked at our surrounding states, and a lot of them are a minimum 2,000, a max 4,000. Those are in bigger, higher population states. So I put the 2,000 in there, being on the lower end. And then obviously the legislature, 1% is a current law. So this will not change anything, Rob, as far as I think I can understand why you're concerned. But again, this has been run through these 44 states and they're working just fine.
Well,
Mike, what would you think about? Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to, and our hearts are in the right place. I think you and I are both trying to accomplish the same thing. Is I want the candidates, again, whether they're Republican or Democratic or Libertarian, I want them to be representative of what the larger electorate wants, not what small numbers of party elites at these conventions want.
Right.
Mike, I wonder if having a sort of open primary where the top 2 candidates, regardless of party, go into the general, wouldn't also help somewhat in this. Like if you have 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans in a district like yours, I assume the 2 Republicans would end up in the general election, where then it would be sort of normie Republican versus somebody a little bit further. Have you thought at all about if some sort of open primary where everybody's running against each other makes any sense?
Yeah, Chad, I have not. Is that kind of like a jungle primary that we
read
about?
So, yeah. But I kind of like the idea of the top 2 candidates going on to the general in these districts where there's
I personally have not thought about that. Okay. I think, Chad, there was a bill a couple sessions ago about that very thing.
There was an attempt at an initiated measure, and I think it ended up getting done in by the pandemic. Pandemic.
It was part of the 807 different election reforms in one initiated measure. But I just think something like that might sort of normalize the people coming out of the process.
Yeah, I haven't given any thought about that, Chad.
Okay.
Might be
I can only handle one thought at a time, Chad. So,
well, then I'm going to throw another curveball at you since we started with baseball.
I play baseball. I can handle it.
Our next guest is Representative Nico Rios.
I have an update on that. We're recording this right now. Representative Rios 2 minutes ago just texted me and said, "Hey, dude, I'm not coming on your boring little show. When I initially agreed to come on Sunday afternoon, I thought it was just to promote my Crisis King resolution, but you seem to be focusing on my social media, not news. Get more important things to do than chat capital gossip. Got more important things to do than chat capital gossip."
So let me first say, this is about the least surprising thing I've ever heard that this guy refused to show up and talk about the things that he did. But Mike, I mean, this guy is not good for your caucus. He's not good for the state. Why isn't the caucus looking at not necessarily expelling him from the legislature, but expelling him from your caucus or doing something? It's weekly. I mean, let me read you a quote, what he said about Democrats. Mike, you know Democrats. You know I'm a Democrat. He said, Democrats want to destroy our country. They want to have abortions up to 7 or 8 months. They want kids to chop off their genitals, and they want international borders. How can we have real policy discussions with somebody like, I know you don't agree with that, Mike.
No, I don't agree with that. The way he treated the police officer during his arrest, his latest comments about the Mexican president, and those comments that you mentioned, I don't agree with it. My colleagues don't agree with it, and we're all offended by it. It's unbecoming of a North Dakota legislator. We're all frustrated by it. We've been through the expulsion process once, which was not pretty. I agree. I know we have a lot of our caucuses here in the Capitol, so he is very welcome to come to those. If we go off campus, that may be a different story. I couldn't agree with you more, Chad. And like I said, my colleagues couldn't agree with you more too. But the people of Wilson had a chance to recall him before this, and I know people worked on finding candidates to recall him, and then nobody stood up. Why? Because it goes back to our previous conversation about the petitions and that group of people. intimidating people, not doing this. So, but the people of Williston have got to step up, and the leaders of Williston. The question should really be the leaders of Williston. What are you going to do about this? They're the ones that elected the guy. They're the ones that saw him. They had a chance to do a recall before this session, but chose not to. And so here we are. Now we're stuck with it. So I think a lot of this.
Them, but you takeaways committee assignments.
Well,
I mean, there are things that can be done here.
Yeah.
And by the way, that was done after his DUI arrest until, we entered the new legislature. Now he's on committees again, but that was done at one point previously.
Yeah. That, Chad, is a decision by Leader LaFour. And I am not going to go down that road with Leader LaFour. So, but Representative Rios just keeps digging himself a hole, right? With these comments and your email today, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I don't know, it's so unbecoming of a North Dakota legislator. It's absolutely very, very embarrassing to everybody.
Representative Nathe, thanks for your time.
Great, thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, do you have a question, comment, or something you want us to discuss on the show?
We want to hear from you.
Leave a voicemail or send a text to 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141, and we might feature it on an upcoming episode.
Thanks for listening to Plain Talk. Now let's get back to today's episode.
Well, we're in the second half of the show, and which would have been an interview with State Representative Nico Rios. We billed it. We put it out there. He agreed to it. But as you heard in the last segment, as we were recording it at 10:24 a.m., the interview was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. Representative Rios texted me and said he's not going to come on our boring little show because we're going to ask him about his social media posts and not his Christ is King resolution. And he doesn't want to, he says he's got more important things to do than chat capital gossip. Honestly, Chad,
I don't know. Does he not know what gossip means? Because literally talking about what he puts on Twitter is not gossip.
Well, I mean, it's a choice that he's made. And I would argue that the two issues are related because he said something about the Jewish heritage of the president of Mexico. I mean, calling her a Jew, which I'm sorry. And that, I mean, when I talked to him about that, he defended it, kind of saying, well, she is Jewish. Well, yeah, Representative Rios is of Mexican descent. But I think if I went around talking about that Mexican lawmaker, people would think that I might have a problem with people of Mexican descent, which I do not. I don't think that about him. So when you're bringing up her ethnicity like that, like you're insulting her with it, it might make us think that you have something. And then you couple that with the Christ is King resolution, which states a bit of theological dogma that Christians certainly believe, and they have every right to believe that. But he wants to enshrine that, put the weight of the state of North Dakota behind it. And how do you think our Jewish citizens might feel about that? Because they don't believe that. That is not a part of their religious belief. So I think the two things go hand in hand. Chad, I thought he was going to be on. When I didn't, I was kind of expecting this text. But when we got to this morning, I thought, okay, I guess he's going to do it. But I
mean, it's the least surprising thing, as I said earlier, that he bailed on this. I also was hoping that we could have a conversation about his resolution of Christ is King, and then compare it to what his Twitter account says about people who disagree with him and using a lot of offensive language over and over and over and over again. I'm a Christian. I don't practice as much as I should, or I don't go to church as much as I should, but he's reading a different Bible than I am. If he thinks this is the way, or, maybe he is reading the same Bible and he's just choosing not to have his actions follow the words that he claims. I mean, you can't just say Christ is King. Don't follow any of the teachings around, welcoming all people, or again, the comments he said about Democrats. When I read the comments that people blatantly say like that about Democrats, I mean, want kids to cut off their genitals. All Democrats want that. I think about my 70-year-old mother, who's a Democrat. Here's what my mom would probably say to all these things. She doesn't agree with anything that he says about Democrats, except for the fact that Democrats don't think he's funny. Because I don't think anybody thinks he's funny. Mike LaFleur did not think he was funny in the articles about the Jew president from Mexico. But it's time again for the House GOP caucus to have some level. You don't have to expel them, right? It doesn't have to be death penalty. If they don't want to go through the Luke Simons thing again, they need to disassociate themselves with this person.
I think expulsion, because this is a little different. The Simons situation was he was harassing people who worked at the Capitol. That's
in the Capitol.
That's a workplace issue. This is Representative Rios represents. I don't have any evidence, or I've heard absolutely nothing that he has misbehaved at the Capitol. He just has some very odious political views, and that puts it in a different category. I think what Representative Nathe just told us about the people of District 23 over in the Williston area need to step up to the plate, because your representative is not being an effective representative. He is embarrassing you. I know the good people of District 23, for the most part, don't agree with this. It's on them. All that being said, you're right, Chad, that the Republican caucus doesn't have to have him there. And they could help demonstrate to the good people of District 23 how unwise it is to send somebody like Representative Rios to Williston by removing his committee assignment so that he doesn't have that influence. Now, he has a right to show up and vote on the floor votes and everything else. That's his right. He's a duly elected until the people of District 23 say otherwise. He's a duly elected member of the legislature. But, the Republicans should act.
But they could just say he's also not part of our caucus. He can be a Republican, but I'm Mike LaFleur. I'm sick of answering for this guy. He's not part of us.
Like Republicans in the legislature, think of how nice that would be if the next time Nico Rios says something dumb or does something dumb, you could just say, hey, he's not a part of our caucus. So you need to talk to the people of District 23 about why they keep sending him to Bismarck. And he has not been on the ballot since the DUI arrest or since this latest conflagration. So, but they could recall him. But I just want to make that part clear.
But you think about the conversation we just had with Mike Nathe. You think about the conversations we had with Scott Lauser and Mark Weber last week, where we're having respectful conversations about policy. I don't agree with any of them on everything. Well, one thing we're going to agree on is this stuff is not acceptable for an elected official from either party. These are good folks. The House GOP has some people who, that I wouldn't want to necessarily hang out with. But there's some really great legislators in that caucus, more than not, who are statesmen. We disagree on some things, but I also don't think it's fair. I mean, I'm the one that asked Mike Nathe about this. Mike Nathe shouldn't have to answer for it either. Kelly Armstrong should also call for him to be expelled from, maybe it's the Republican Party, or that kind of thing. But something needs to be done when this guy is making the comments, and then he embarrasses himself on the floor. I mean, this week he stood up and talked about a bonus, or maybe it was last week, a bonus for law enforcement. And he stood up and sort of giggled about his history with law enforcement. Listeners will recall his DUI and his racist and homophobic slurs towards the cop. And then he quoted Doug Burgum as saying, in North Dakota, backing the blue is not just a motto, it's a way of life. And he said, I agree with that. Well, again, his actions don't back that up. And the fact he stood up and said, close your eyes and pretend it's somebody else saying this, and making a joke of his behavior. Again, this isn't a one-off sort of thing. This is one after another, and it's an embarrassment to the state, and Republicans should be embarrassed to have him part of their party.
And it's not an ideological thing. With the things that he's espousing, they're not conservative, they're not liberal, they're not libertarian, they're not any of those things. If you are making an issue about somebody's ethnicity, as he did with the president of Mexico, that's just bigotry. That's not an ideology. That's not a political party. That's not a policy position. It's nothing. If you get arrested for DUI and you pull the "Do you know who I am" card and you try to give them your legislative business card, and then you get mad and you call them a slur for homosexuals, and on the ride to the lockup, You berate the officer was born in England and had an audible English accent, telling him that his country is being invaded by migrants and immigrants who are raping women and all these things. This is not a policy position. This doesn't have anything to do with your politics. This has to do with your personal integrity and who you are, and the fact that you lack it.
But Rob, I would also go back to the comment about Democrats. When Nico Rios gets elected to be a member of the House of Representatives in District 23, he represents all people in District 23. If this is the way he thinks about the minority community of District 23 of Democrats,
there aren't many.
There aren't many, but they exist, and they deserve representation as well. And if this is the way he thinks about a segment of people, that they want children to chop off their genitals, that's just not a fact. And I will again say, you look at somebody like Representative Mike Nathe, who's a representative to a lot of Democrats I know, maybe not a lot, right? It's South Bismarck, but he represents them. If they call him, he's not asking, are you a Democrat or a Republican? He's going to represent his constituents. Nico Rios clearly doesn't have the ability to do that.
Well, it's and the thing too is the things he says about the chopping off the genitals, which is just it's such an ugly thing. We have legitimate debates to be had about when we're going forward. And what my point is, it makes those debates harder when that sort of rhetoric comes in, because that is not the conservative position or the Republican position on that issue. It's perfectly legitimate to say, when should people who are minors be allowed to have those surgeries? That's a tough call. There are compelling emotional arguments to make on both sides of it. And I think serious people are trying to figure out, where do we draw the lines? What is the proper amount of government involvement in this process? When the grown-ups are trying to have that debate, and then you have Rios and maybe a few others over on the sidelines talking like that, it makes it harder for us to arrive at policy conclusions that we can all live with, and to have a respectful debate all the time. I think about the people, and it's really kind of heartwarming at times to watch some of these committee hearings, and you watch somebody who comes to the podium who clearly doesn't have a lot of experience at the legislature. There's somebody, they got a job, they're not a lobbyist, they're not a professional activist, they're not any of those things. They're just somebody who's got an issue and they want to come to their legislature and they want to talk. And you'll hear the chair how accommodating they are and understanding they are, and really working hard to make that person feel welcome. And it's a little bit different when a lobbyist they all know comes up.
Right.
They know the process, and they're not rude to that person, but they know the process.
Hold on. Not always rude to that person.
Okay. Well, not all. Okay. Fair enough. But, they come in, I mean, they know the process. It's a different level. We have a very open system, and it's just out of, again, it's beyond politics, and it's un-North Dakotan. Maybe that's the right way to put it, we have such an open process. And what you just described with Representative Nathe, I would say that's the norm for most people in the legislature, Republican and Democrat. If you're a constituent and you call them with an issue, they'll probably try to help you.
And they will not identify you as a Democrat or Republican. They will identify you as a constituent, right? That's the first thing that they will do. But again, I want to go through this sort of track record of Nico Rios, and he stood up on the back of the blue thing. He also had just this really, really weird line of questioning this week on the personhood bill, where he was asking Carla Rose Hansen if she had a soul, and if there was a scientific breakthrough that said when the soul starts, if she then would, I watched that and I was like, what the hell are you talking about, man? Beyond the sort of, he's not adding a lot to these and I wanted to ask him about that too. But again, it's a lot of talk, but not a lot of ability to come on and have a conversation about these things.
Think about that. If you're somebody who wants that personhood bill to pass and you support it, then do you want Nico Rios making the arguments for you? Yeah. Because I wouldn't. I would probably want somebody like a Yana Myrdal or something who knows that issue well. And obviously, she's plenty polarizing at times, but she's within the bounds of the normal argument.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
And Nico Rios, called for Kelly Armstrong to be primaried and all those other things. But I'll tell you, at the governor's ball, I saw Nico running around that place and, thirsty for attention from the sitting governor. I wanted to ask him about that too. I mean, it's really easy to be behind your Twitter account and call it gossip when people actually listen to what you say and then talk about what you say. And again, kind of like what I said to the gentleman on Wednesday, Nico probably likes this, that we're talking about him right now.
Yeah. I wanted to ask him what he calls his haircut, because I had
you told me we weren't allowed to say stuff like that.
I've a lot, but I've had a lot of people in the audience, that's the question they want. What if you went to the barber and asked for that, what's it called? I don't know.
You know what it's called? The Rios.
The Rios. All right, fair enough.
You know who can't do the Rios? This guy, because I don't got anything up here.
I'm not working with enough hair on my head.
I kind of got the reverse Rios. I can grow hair on this anyway.
Insofar that nothing is the opposite of something, then yes, you have the reverse.
Anyway,
I don't. Let's talk about the property tax bill. I think Representative Nathe's right, just because it's that his property tax bill has the governors. I think that's going to be the skeleton they put everything else on. I think that's right. I wanted to ask you, two things. I think it's a mistake to put income taxes in there. I think you're just asking for trouble. And again, I'm not against doing it. Make it its own bill. Because this is what we're trying to do with property taxes is complicated enough. So I hope that gets stripped out at some point. Not because I'm against the idea, make it separate. But the other thing is allowing the opt out with the vote. At first blush, I kind of like it. If the voters decide to do this to themselves, will the people? So I don't know. How did you feel about that?
So I think two things. I agree with you that the income tax piece should not have been included in there. I disagree with you. I don't think it should pass on its own. But I think this was Craig Headland, right? I mean, income taxes last session, the previous session, his goal is to get income taxes down to zero. So I don't think we should be all surprised that he sort of amended that in. Nobody's asking for that $50 million. No, there's very few people who are asking for another $20, $50 off of their income taxes. Again, I think it's 60% of North Dakotans don't pay income taxes already. This will help everybody a little bit, but not a huge. I think that bracket that they would eliminate down to zero, people would save like $112. So it's about the same amount that they took off of the primary tax number, because that went from 15. Was it 15.5 to 14.5? I think. I'm against.
He was making room. I say take it out and put the primary tax.
Put the $100 back in.
Back up.
So I disagree that should come out. I think if these caps go into effect at 3%, the vast, vast, vast majority of political subs will figure out how to make it work. There's going to be outliers. I mean, we've seen some from Fargo who said, they're going to go bankrupt if this cap goes into place. That
was Cass County was saying that they were.
Oh, it's Cass County. Okay, not Fargo.
They're going to have big deficits. Although Fargo's not for it either.
Yeah, but I don't know how many people will use that 10-year opt-out anyway. So I think putting it in and then seeing how that plays out, I wouldn't have a problem with that. The other thing that I think was interesting is I think if they went above their cap, not the opt-out, but the above the cap, if they put it on a general election ballot, they have to get 50%. But if they do a special election, you have to get 60%. So, I mean, that's sort of taking the political sub's ability to sort of play fast and loose when these elections are taking place away from them, which I like. I think that we should have as many people as possible voting on things. And if you're not going to, there should be a higher threshold.
Do you think they should even be? I don't know. I mean, should there even be an option to have it outside of a general election?
The only thing I would say is timing. Right? I mean, if you have an expense that comes up, I don't know enough about the budget.
We have general election votes every 2 years. Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I think it's fine. I think it helps rhetorically. I don't know that it gets used that much. And if they do get used, I mean, it's going to be tough to ask North Dakotans in just about every part of the state right now to voluntarily vote to get rid of the cap.
Well,
I just
and
don't.
right now, right? It might be a different world in 4 years once we start getting that primary tax money rolling.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing we have to think about when we make laws. They're relatively permanent. So, we have to think about it. It's not just legislating for this moment, it's legislating for down the road. I think it's a good thing. I think it gives more flexibility without risking too much flexibility to where we sort of destroy the relief that we're trying to put in place. So I think that's a very good thing. For the most part, I like the amendments they made to the bill coming out of committee. I think the committee did, but for the income tax part, which I think was a tactical mistake, I like the rest of it. I think it's good.
Yeah, I think a couple things that I was going to ask Representative Nathe about, but he answered them before I was able to. I mean, one was thought it was strange that House Finance and Tax had a special meeting on a Thursday when they only meet Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 5:00. And, but he mentioned that there's a member who wanted to participate in this. They have to kick those bills out of the committee by Monday when that guy couldn't be there. That member couldn't be there. And then removing the intent language. The original bill had the intent language that said our intent is to get down to zero. I know that there's some legislators, we talked to Weber and Lauser about this skin in the game sort of thing, that was giving heartburn to some legislators. It doesn't actually do anything because the legislature every 2 years can change it anyway.
That can be a debate for future sessions.
Right. But I tend to agree with you. I think that, the vote was bipartisan in support of this. Both Democrats voted for it. 2 rural Republicans voted against it. I think, again, that's where we're seeing sort of that ag piece pop up a little bit. And I'll be interested in this ag piece when it comes to rural Republicans on the floor and appropriations and other places. I thought Representative Nathe did a really good job of responding to that and pushing back on that criticism. You can tell he's heard it before, so he was ready for it. But yeah, overall, I think the process is moving good. I'm interested if they're going to kill all these other bills now.
Yeah. And part of me thinks they should kill them. And then if there's parts of them that make sense, put them in this bill. Let's make it work. The ag thing, I think, is another thing like the income tax. If we want to do something for the ag property owners, let's do it in a separate bill. But it's not really. This is about primary residence relief. And people who are living on farms, either they already have primary residence relief because they live on the farm and their primary residence, they have the exemption, or if they live in town, then they're going to benefit from this bill, right? If they live off the farm and they're paying a property tax on a resident because they live in town or they live off away from the farm, then they're going to benefit from this bill. So I think the ag people want to do something specifically about ag land, and I think they're trying to hitch their wagon to this thing because this is the bill that's got the steam. I think we have to have that bill separate. And in my conversation with the governor, I think he's open to it. I mean, I don't think anybody's against doing something along those lines. I think maybe it shouldn't be part of this bill.
So I also think there's cost at factor here, right? I mean, if you try to do everything, it's going to get too expensive to do this property tax relief. Again, like I said when we had Lauser on, I would kind of like that we spread it out a little bit so everybody's getting something. I thought Nathe's response to commercial, if you're giving something to ag land, then don't you have to give something to commercial? What does this look like?
Ag land, really, in a way, it's just another type of commercial land. I mean,
right. Yeah.
Making revenue off the land. It's not like my home. I'm not making any, in residential properties under the governor's bill, and under Representative Lauser's bill, it would be different. But under the governor's bill, if you have rental properties, you're still paying property tax on those.
Right.
Because they're generating revenue.
Yep. Yeah, but again, like we've been saying since during Measure 4, after Measure 4, they're going to do something, and it's going to be something substantial. I don't question that at all anymore.
Let me ask you a crazy question. Neither of us has served in the legislature for a term, so neither of us are qualified to be attorneys. But that was a joke.
It was pretty good. It feels like a real narrow audience for that joke, but it landed with me.
If people are understanding, Representative Lori Vansickle has a bill that would allow lawmakers to sit for the bar exam after serving for a term in the legislature.
Oh, by the way, when we talked about that bill before, I said this is the Brandon Pritchard bill, and somebody corrected me and said he wouldn't qualify because he only served 2 years. He only served the end, so he wouldn't qualify.
Because that was a new district.
Yep.
Or redrawn district.
Yep.
Anyway. Okay, but I was going to ask, single subject. does putting an income tax reform in a property tax bill violate single subject?
Well, let's say because we both think it should be out of this bill, yes, it absolutely violates that. But no, I'm guessing they would say that. I'm guessing they would say this is all tax.
Odd umbrella of tax.
Right.
I think the problem with that is we don't really know how the courts are going to feel. Like,
Right.
in my mind, income tax is a very different policy area than property tax. So in my mind, that does violate single subject. I mean, one is a property tax bill. The other, how granular are we in single subjects? I don't know that the courts have been all that clear on that.
Yeah, and I think how this plays out, frankly, is we saw last session the House wanted to do something on income taxes. This Senate didn't. Bill will go over to the Senate. They're going to strip the income piece out. Then they're going to pass it. Then we're going to go to a conference committee. And the question will be, Leader LaFleur, Craig Hedlund, people like Mike Nathe, who seem to not really be a fan of the income tax piece. How much do they dig in with the House's position of including some income tax? I would imagine this ends up not being in the bill because it's my understanding they have to find $8 billion still. That's how much the current appropriations bills that are alive are over budget.
And it's just, again, I don't know that voters, I would vote for it. I think it's fine. I just don't think it's a priority right now. Property taxes, let's think a little. You wouldn't want to pass it at all. I would want to pass it, but it's not a priority for me. And I know Representative Nathe, last session, when Governor Burgum came out and was very vocal saying he didn't want to do another property tax buy down, he'd rather do income tax reform and nothing like because Governor Armstrong's bill's not a buy down because it has the cap attached. But in that context, Representative Nathe was very much against the income tax push. It's not like I think he's like just loves the income tax. I just think Representative Nathe very much prioritizes property tax, which I think my position right now.
Yeah, and Representative Nathe, knowing the district he represents, it's homeowners, right? It's a lot of homeowners down there, not a lot of renters necessarily. I can imagine how much he heard in his neighborhood about property taxes, just sort of knowing Bismarck the way I do.
It really surprised me when Governor Burgum said that. First of all, I don't know why he was talking about it. He's not the governor anymore. Not that he's not allowed to talk about it, I guess, if he wants, but I don't know what he was trying to do, taking that shot at property tax reform. And also, I just think he's wrong.
Yeah. Well, but then he also had the idea of a $5 million website that would tell property taxpayers who to contact. And then Murdahl introduced the bill and that went down. But I thought that was silly too. Let's put together a website so then Chad Oban's mad about his property taxes and he can log in and find out who to be pissed about.
It's not hard to get in touch with your county commission or your city or whoever. These are very easy people to find. And yes, voters should, if you are not happy about your property taxes, you should be contacting them and respectfully communicating that to them.
Yeah.
And that should
that's a good use of the public comment time at your local political sub meeting.
Not the way it's been used, which, by the way, I've been getting a lot of emails from people calling me a money changer. I don't know. In response to some of the thing with Representative Rios, where I've written critically about what he's tweeted, the gentleman who's been abusing the public comment periods over in Dickinson, I am now on some mailing lists for people who think that the Jewish people control everything and all of that, and I just and have apparently concluded that I am Jewish.
So are you Jewish or are you being paid by the Jewish community for your opinions?
It varies, from person to person. Either I'm hiding it and I'm in denial and I'm hiding it, or I'm a goyim who's been bought off.
Let me ask very pointedly: are either of those things true, Rob? Either of those things true?
No. I was born. My mother's side of the family is Protestant Lutheran, Scandinavian origin, Norwegian. My father's side is agnostic, Germans. I don't know. My dad's side of the family, they were kind of rogues and brigands.
And you're not getting paid off, though? I guess there's no way to prove that.
I wish I had more
Yeah,
money.
let me be clear. If anybody wants to pay me off for my opinion, are you listening, George Soros? Go ahead. Checks in the mail. Let's roll.
Over the years, I've been accused of being paid off by this and that. And as somebody at one point, this was years and years ago, I saw somewhere where supposedly an oil company had bought me a house somewhere, and they were claiming that this was true and just absolutely. And I jumped in. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have, because you shouldn't engage with these people. But I jumped in the thread asking them if they knew the address, because
I'd like to swing by.
I'd like to see it. That sounds really nice. No, we do not do pay to play on here. I have one source of income, my employer, Forum Communications, who are I love working for Forum Communications, and that's not me just buttering them up. But no, I mean, the idea that I'm paid off by anybody, no. And I think if you saw our weekly grocery budget, you would know that I am definitely not paid off by anybody, because we don't eat steak nearly as often as I would like.
Well, or as you should to help those cattle producers out around North Dakota.
Heck yeah. They
Yeah.
make a good product. They make a good
Yeah.
product. All right. Wait, I'm sorry that Representative Rios showed up. And by the way, Chad and I talked about this. This wasn't going to be a gotcha interview. Our intent was to really try to explore some of this stuff with him. But I mean, also put him on the spot. He has said some really repugnant things, and I would like to hear his explanations. I realize that was probably going to be uncomfortable for him. Because really saying that there were sort of things he said is not defensible. There's not a good defense for them. I wouldn't want to have to be in the position of defending them either, which, by the way, North Dakota Republicans, maybe put yourselves in a position where you don't have to defend them either. But anyway, I'm sorry that Representative Rios wasn't on. I was looking at that interview. It's too bad he's not. But thank you.
No, I've got something I want to close with, and I've got a bone to pick with you, Port.
Uh-oh.
So next Wednesday, I'm not going to be here, and there's going to be a guest host sitting in for me. And I heard about this through the grapevine. There was no conversations beforehand. I actually heard about it from our friend Jay Bell, who had been asked to step in, and then she was replaced. Because, by the way, when Jessica has to work, everybody just accepts she has to work. But if I have to work out of state, everybody says I'm on vacation. That doesn't seem fair. But you chose to have Aaron Oban sit in for me. And the text exchange I saw was Aaron saying, well, I don't know if I can do it. And your response was, well, if Chad can do it, anybody can do it.
I stand by it. I'm not sorry. And by the way, you deserve that, because yesterday I was sitting out in my driveway. I called you from my speakerphone in my car. And by way of explaining why I was on speakerphone in my car, I said, I come out early because I get anxious in the house waiting for everybody to get ready. So I go out and sit in the car and wait, because I'm a weirdo and I get places ridiculously early. My wife then gets in the car. I alert you, because I'm a polite person, to the fact that my wife gets in the car. You chose to end the conversation thusly. You said, I'm glad your family finally, with that emphasis, with that inflection in your voice, because I'm glad your family was finally able to come. And then you hung up, and my wife is staring daggers at me. That's great.
So, okay, that's fair. That is complete.
It was a chilly evening in the Port household yesterday, and not because of the weather outside. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I am glad that I had a part in that taking place. And I will just say that Aaron will do a very good job sitting in for me. I will tell you, when I found out, I texted her and said, what the hell is going on? You can't handle me getting any attention, can you? And she responded with, oh, sweetie. So I think there's some truth to it.
Oracle pat on the head.
Yeah. Oh, sweetie. Anyway, we'll miss J Bell on Wednesday, but I'm sure Aaron's going to do just fine. Sorry to Mrs. Port for any honesty that was thrown into your vehicle last night, but he's anxious. I mean, I've been there, man, where I'm waiting for my family in the car and I am mad. So maybe this will do some good in the long run.
In their defense, part of the problem is me, because I will get places rudely early. Like, I will show up at somebody's house party so stupidly early, I will have to circle the block to kill time so that I could show up and only be politely early. So part of the problem is me. I recognize it.
I don't know why you're getting so defensive. You've said she doesn't listen to this garbage, so she's not going to hear it, right?
Oh, she's standing off screen staring at me right now. So break. So I may even be in more trouble now.
Another icy day, icy weekend at the Port Casa.
Let's end this show now, before I end up getting divorced again. All right, here we go. Thank you for listening so much. I appreciate it. We're gonna put a pin in it there. And coming up next week, Aaron Oban sitting in for Chad Oban, the better Oban. We have upgraded the Oban.
Good luck getting her not to drop F-bombs if you start talking about the legislative session.
We may need to have a conversation with her beforehand. All right, thank you for listening. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. If you went to the barber and asked for that, what's it called? I don't know.
You know what it's called? The Rios.
The Rios. All right, fair enough.